You don't have to say, I'm so-and-so's daughter, I'm so-and-so's sister. You get to decide how you're going to walk in a room and what you want to share. And it feels like a clean slate in some ways. But with that is when we do have to reflect and say, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I want?
Welcome to Counselor Off the Clock. I am Lydia Thompson, and I am the host of this podcast and a licensed counselor. I am so excited to share our first repeat guest for season 2, Emily Kerlin. She's an excellent clinician who works at my practice, Concord Family Counseling. We both work with adolescents and young adults, so it seemed only fitting to cover the launch phase, which is part of the transition into adulthood. We talk about failure to launch and relaunching later in life. This is a peek into what we really talk about on the daily at our office. For this podcast, my aim is to make mental health conversations more accessible and to keep you company while you grow. If you are loving this podcast, subscribe, give us a rating. I hope you can get comfortable because we are off the clock. Well, thank you, Emily, for being on the podcast. You are our first repeat for season 2. And you were our first guest.
I was.
On the podcast.
I was. It's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Now, I was like, oh, this is your second episode back, and you were like third. Because the first time we recorded 2 in one day.
Yes, we did.
And so it kind of felt to me like we recorded just one.
Yeah. We recorded 2 that day. And a lot has changed.
What has changed?
That day.
What has changed?
Well, the biggest changes were in a very different office, in a very different building. We moved offices.
Woo-hoo.
And we love our office, but the really exciting part is Lydia and I finally work together in the same building.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Yes, it is.
Not in a bad way.
No, not at all.
But being able to see you, like, I don't know.
Multiple days a week.
Multiple days a week.
Yes.
Which is so fun.
I know. I love it.
We also have our intern, Alex, in the room with us.
We do. She is in the room with us.
So if we mess up, you're gonna stop us?
I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah. Good luck.
She's
stopping
got us.
these 2 over here.
I
Look
know.
at us.
We can't even get started.
We can't. This has been a whirlwind already.
How are you liking our new office? Other than obviously being next door to the best person ever.
You got it. Right. I love our new office. I love all of us being in one space. I think that was something you really valued. And I think I knew it was going to be great, but I really do. It's better than I thought it was going to be. I think it's fun to open your door and either see someone's in session or someone's not, or, hey, let's eat lunch in the same room, or even just like, I made a pot of coffee. Do you want, a cup? So it is so great. I love our office. I am way in the back, which I love. For those of you listening, my previous office was right off the waiting room. And so I chose the office the farthest from the waiting room. And I love it. I love where I am. But we have discovered that my office doesn't regulate temperature maybe the way the rest of the offices and building does. So my office gets very, very cold the longer the day goes. So my evening clients are under blankets and we are miserable, but we're not sure what's going on with it, but it is the coldest office by far. But I don't want to move. You have given me the option and I continue to say, no, I want this office. So
I said, which one do you want?
I know.
And you picked the coldest office.
I did. And to be fair, I didn't know that. But now I do, and I don't want to move, but it is the coldest office. So,
other than that, it's a lovely office.
Yes.
But I have no idea. My office is fine.
I know. You remind me, and I'm like, it's not fine next door. Literally, we're next door to each other. So, we share a wall. It doesn't seem to matter.
The warmth does not reach you.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So... But other than that, I love it. How is it for you? You know.
I do love it.
Yeah?
Yeah, no, it's great. I have a great view of a dumpster.
Yes.
An amazing view of a dumpster.
Yes.
And then the sunset, it feels like I'm complaining, but it is kind of funny. The sun comes in and hits actually like right where you're sitting.
Yeah.
And so throughout the day, I have to, as your office gets colder, mine gets warmer with the sun.
Wow.
So yeah, just regulating temperature and sunshine and...
Yep.
But I like it. My clients like it.
Yeah.
It's so great to all be together. Oh, I actually probably need to let the people know who you are.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you didn't listen to our wildly popular, some would call it, viral podcast episode about demystifying the therapy process with Emily Kerlin.
Yes.
So Emily is a clinician at Concord Family Counseling, which is my counseling practice. We offer counseling services to the South Nashville area. So who do you work with primarily?
I primarily am seeing teenagers, and I'm seeing lots of young adults and some couples. I would say I really enjoy kind of all three of those buckets. I also have lots of individual adults that I enjoy as well. I discovered throughout this process that I am in a place and in a season where I don't want to see anyone under basically 14, 15. So luckily we have other great therapists who love the littles, and so they will take them and do great with them. But it's not me. So I will take the teenager, I will take the young adult, I'll take even the parent, not parent, older adult, and also couples. So still a wide variety, and I really enjoy the variety. I think I've felt this pressure in grad school to nail down this population I wanted to see. And I don't feel that pressure as much. I really enjoy going from kind of one thing to another. There's days that it's nice when I only see teenagers or when I only see couples, because you're kind of in that mode. But I think it keeps me using a lot of my different counseling muscles, I think, when I see different populations. So I enjoy it. I do. But those are my favorites right now.
Yeah, one of our overlaps, and when we were talking about what to talk about today, one of our overlaps is what we would call the launch phase. Now, I thought that was something like people knew what that was. And then Alex, our intern, was like, I've never even heard that.
Yeah.
So let's define for our listeners what the launch phase is. So what definition do you give the launch phase?
When I think about launch phase, when I hear launch phase, I immediately think about teenagers graduating high school and headed into the next stage. So whether that's trade school, college, right into the workforce, military, whatever it might be, that's the first kind of group of people I think about when we talk about a launch phase. I think the way I would define that is when a large change or transition is closer to, we are closer to that large transition rather than what we currently know. So when I think about the launch phase, I would say 16 is where I would start to say that that's where the phase begins, because 16-year-olds are closer to the next phase or the next stage or season than they are continuing to be a high schooler in their parents' home. So for me, I would define it as when we are closer to that change or transition than we are to what we've been used to or what we know. How would you define it?
Now, I had a really good definition yesterday.
You did.
Let's see if I can actually say it again. So I would say the launch phase is the end of adolescence. So adolescence takes someone from childhood into adulthood. And so the launch phase is the final push into adulthood.
Yeah.
And away from, a lot of times, family.
Yeah.
Which we're definitely going to talk about today. The role of family in the launch phase. It is the baby bird flying out of the nest.
Yeah.
It is the launch.
Yep.
And that can sometimes be some of the scariest part, is okay, I'm without training wheels now.
Yeah.
I'm on my own.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of these things on my own. So I think the launch phase, like you said, could probably start around 16.
Mm-hmm.
And what we know is a launch phase is not about age.
Yeah.
Because people could launch, I would say a late launch, but could launch at 28, 29.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of issues with launching that late. But a normal launch happens from 16 to 20.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. I would completely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a tough phase of life. Tell me about why this phase of life is important to you and the work that you do.
Yeah. I think the launch phase is so important because I think it is a big moment for both parents and launchers, launchees and launchers. So it's a big moment in both those parties' lives. And I think those don't happen that often, where it's a big moment in the student's life or the child's life, and it's a big moment in the parent's life. And they're kind of coming to this intersection of what do we do with all of this? And so I think those are few and far between of where they're both really special and can look back and go, oh yeah, that was a big moment for all of us. So I think that's really important. My launch phase was great. I am a second born, so I'm the youngest. So I had watched my older sister launch ahead of me, and she had launched really well. And she went farther away to college. And I knew I wanted to be a little bit closer to home than she was. So as my launch phase was coming, I only applied to one college. I knew that's where I wanted to go my whole life. So maybe that's what made it easy, as I wasn't making any big choices in that regard. But, I think the reason that my launch phase, and I think my sister would say her launch phase was good as well, was my parents.
What did they do that helped you in your launch phase?
Yeah, it's interesting looking at it now as an adult. My parents, I think, held space for both my emotions and their emotions. And so there was a fear of, I'm moving away. I was moving about 4 hours from home to go to college. I didn't know anyone. And so it was all very new and very scary. And I was really excited about what I was going to do. And they were really excited. And they were launching their last kid in the home. And what did that look like for them? And they were now empty nesters. And so I look at it now, and my parents really had done the work of working through their own grief and sadness, and also being able to hold space for the excitement and joy and even pride that they had in me. My mom says so often, like, you were just so ready, and I just knew you were so ready.
Yeah.
And so hearing that, I think it was a pride-filled statement of, they are proud of who I am and what I've done, and they helped get me here. They helped make sure I was ready. So it wasn't all me. So I had a really good experience when it comes to the launch phase of me going to college, and my parents, I think, held space for all of those emotions. It wasn't all about me, and it wasn't all about them. And I think the launch phase can be consumed by either the launcher or the launchee. And I think the healthy space is when we go, there's room for both to feel all of the experience that they're about to have.
Yeah, I think it is a moment where there is separation. And if you have a healthy attachment to your parental figures, then you can detach and go do your own thing, and the attachment is still there.
Yes.
And it sounds like they were still like, hey, we're not going anywhere. We support you and we believe in you.
Yeah.
You're not leaving us. We're not leaving you.
Yes.
And then you also had clarity.
Yeah.
About where you were headed.
Yep.
Which I think actually is pretty rare.
Yes. Very much so. Very much so. I think you're right. I think I did have confidence that I knew that's where I wanted to go to school. I had some doubts along the way, but I think at the end of the day, I'm really glad I felt that confident in it. And it was the best 4 years of my life, and I absolutely loved it. It's interesting as you talk about that attachment piece. I don't know a whole lot about rockets and launching physically. One of my best friends in college, he worked for NASA right after we graduated, so he would be very disappointed to know I didn't
We'll give him a call.
listen to whatever he was studying. It wasn't the same as mine, trust me. But I think about how one of the most important pieces when you're watching a shuttle launch, which my father made sure we did, is the launch pad itself. And I think that is a great representation of the attachment piece and the home piece. So, hey, you're launching, but you can always come back to this. This is always secure. This is always safe. This is a strong foundation. And so we want you to go. We want you to take flight. And the launch pad doesn't move. It's the same place with the same people who are safe. And so as you're talking about that attachment, that's that image that's coming in my head of the importance of doing the work from all parties to make sure that kids know that launch pad is there. And I think everyone's launch pad looks different.
Yeah.
Everyone's home looks very different. And yet, I think it's important for teenagers especially to know they can always come back to that.
Yeah. We're always going to be here. We still love you. Get out of our house.
You got it. Yep.
Go launch.
Yes.
I think these are I'll put this back on you.
Okay.
What issues do you see coming up with the launch phase? As we know, this is a huge moment for parent, for child, and so it is fraught with issues and things that can go wrong. So tell us about the things you see in your practice, about the ways in which launch can go wrong.
Yeah. One of the ways launch goes wrong is when parents or guardians or caregivers' worries and fears consume the entire space and the entire season. So it is completely normal and appropriate that parents have a fear of launching their kids. That's normal and that's okay. Where I think issues creep in is when that becomes the primary conversation in the home, when that becomes the primary issue, when that becomes the primary topic. The primary concern is parents' worries and fears for their child. I think what's deeper maybe within that for parents is a child's success, if you will, in the launch phase or failure in the launch phase is a reflection of them. And I think parents feel that deeply in the launch phase of, well, if they go and do this and it doesn't work out, or they go and don't make friends, or they make the wrong friends, or they don't get in this sorority or fraternity or college or job, what does that say about us as parents? And I think if we can detach that before the launch phase, issues will decrease, because that is communicating to your kid that your reputation and how people perceive you is based on them. And that is not fair. So I think working through that detachment of what your kid does or doesn't do isn't a reflection of how good or bad of a parent you are or were. So I think that is probably the biggest area I see that it comes up about what can make a launch phase hard, and I would even say tenacious, because you also have a kid who's excited and who's also feeling all of the feelings their parents are feeling. They're scared. They're nervous. They don't know what they're doing. And so there has to be room for that. And I think mutual understanding rather than this environment that can be filled with pressure and expectations.
Yeah. The launch phase is about the person being launched.
Yes. That's really good.
That's who it's about.
Yes.
And so when it's not about that person,
yes,
then there can be some issues. Yeah, and I think you're also hitting on, this is a time of extreme emotion.
Yes.
Extreme excitement and extreme fear.
Yes.
And so the issues usually come around that extreme fear.
Yes.
Fear is normal around the launch phase for both the parent or the caregiver and the child. It is so scary.
Yeah.
And so we have to balance the fear and the excitement.
Yeah. It reminds me how I'm not sure where we learned this. I don't know if it's culture. I don't know if it's just how we're wired. I'm not sure. But I am reminded that multiple emotions, even if they're opposing, can coexist. And so I think we often swing to the extreme of I either need to be in grief or I need to be super happy or I need to be really mad or completely content. And so when we're talking about launch phase, I think both parties feel I need to either be extremely excited and have no fear, or I need to be super scared and have no excitement. And I think it's both. It's both. It's saying I'm super excited and I'm super scared, and allowing both of those to be true. We're not trying to move from one extreme to the other, but going, yeah, both of those are true, and both parties feel both of those emotions.
So a lot of times around launch is this term and this movie called Failure to Launch.
Yes.
And can you talk about what failure to launch looks like?
I would first want to ask how we're defining failure. So how are we measuring successful or not successful launch phase?
Well, let's go back then.
Yeah.
What is a successful launch?
That's a really good question. And I'm trying to think how I would measure that. I'm sitting here thinking, how would I know when someone is launched?
I would say what I'm looking for in a successful launch is independence.
It's great.
And we can have interdependence, right? I can call my mom for advice, or I can call my dad because he's a great listener. But I am doing everything on my own to sustain my life.
Yes. That is a great way to put it. As you're saying independence, I was really thinking about characteristics I look for when a healthy parent-child relationship post-launch phase. And so much of that is their ability to be more independent and less codependent or just dependent on mom and dad or their parents or guardians. So I think independence is right. I think you've nailed that. That's a great measure of when a kid has successfully launched. What was your question? So then, what's a failure? Okay.
Well, I think what we're seeing currently is a delayed launch.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah.
As much as we are saying, okay, it's, usually around 16 to 20. But what we're seeing is when people are receiving more education and the economy is really difficult, it is hard to separate and find independence, especially financially.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it does take a long time to find that independence. And so what we're seeing is a delay.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, we're in Nashville, Tennessee, which is a very expensive place to live. And so we probably are seeing it more in our office maybe than other areas. But you are absolutely right. And so I think, how do we hold space for that delay, if you will? And also, can we see some other areas where independence might beginning to blossom and bloom in their life, right? So there might be this piece of financially it's going to take a little bit longer, but they have created their own friends and they contribute to maybe cooking their own meals or doing their own laundry or paying for more of their bills, right?
Or even an identity.
Yes.
One of the most difficult things with the adolescence phase for parents is the separation of identity. That's one of the goals of adolescence, is to find an identity outside of the family. And that can be very difficult.
Yeah.
And so coming to the end of adolescence and into adulthood, what I'm looking for in a successful launch is an identity outside of the family. That means that an adult has their own value system, their own opinions, and their own beliefs that could be aligned with their family system, and they could be not aligned with their family system, but thinking on their own about what do they want, what do they feel, what do they think.
Yes. And what's interesting is that I think begins at 16, which is when we see the tension arise with parents and teenagers.
For sure.
Rather than this, let's let them explore some of that within healthy boundaries. That's when it begins of what do I want?
Because like a 16-year-old doesn't know how to express like, hey mom, I don't want to vote for the same person you want to vote for.
Right.
And so they tend to be like assholes about it when they're 16.
Yes.
And then if you can hold that safe space for them as they're expressing these different opinions, what we're looking for is for them to have their own opinions.
Yes. Yes. And what do they value? And what do they want out of their life? What do they want people to say about them when they walk out of a room? And that begins at 16. And then sometimes parents want to push against that or control that or get very scared of that. And so they shut it down. And then we're talking in the launch phase, and now it feels like we're confused and it's intertwined, and they're angry at their parents and all of that. And so you are right, this identity piece. And one of the things that I think is healing about a launch phase is you get to write your story, right? So you walk in a room and you get to decide how you introduce yourself. You don't have to say, I'm so-and-so's daughter, I'm so-and-so's sister. You get to decide how you're going to walk in a room and what you want to share. And it feels like a clean slate in some ways. But with that is when we do have to reflect and say, what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that I want? I laugh and joke and am serious that myself and lots of my therapist friends, when we are in situations where maybe socially we don't really want to engage with anyone, or we're on an airplane, we all have a different job that we say that we do.
What job do you say?
I say I'm a dental hygienist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does anybody ever ask any follow-up questions?
No, not with a dental hygienist. I used to be, I sell life insurance, but that poses some potential questions. So I dropped that and I'm a dental hygienist. So it's similar because there's a similar vibe of I have a clean slate. This random person I'm not going to engage with again. I can say whatever I want about me. And I think that's true in the launch phase as well. You get to walk in a room and decide who's in the room with you and what you want your future and your life to look like. And so that's part of the healing process that can happen in the launch phase, which I think reminds me of what does it look like when adults have to launch or relaunch.
So now that we've defined a successful launch, what does it mean to succeed? I would love to come back to that question of failure to launch as a period. Now, we do not like the word failure in our field. We like to rebrand it as like growing and learning, and nothing is really a failure, but that is the term failure to launch.
Yeah.
So I'd like to define that for our listeners, and how they could maybe know that either they had a failure to launch or maybe they currently are in a failure to launch. Now, I think the failure to launch in like the movies and in culture is like a 40-year-old man living in his parents' basement. Yeah. Now, inherently, that's not failure to launch, right? Yeah. The economy is tough. Right. However, going back to failure to launch is not having a separation from your family system. Yes. We don't have an identity outside of our family. Yeah. And maybe outside of our parents. Yeah. And that could look like financially. Yeah. That could look like my identity and values I haven't actually examined yet. Yes. and I'm not a separate person outside of my family.
Yep.
So that's what I would define as a failure to launch. It could also be that there is a delayed launch period.
Yep.
For whatever reason. Circumstances are tough. I think I had a more delayed launch period just because of my education. I was in school for a long time and I needed help.
Yeah.
And I needed a lot more help through a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And so, and so there isn't a clear definition, but I would say that's what we're looking for in terms of a successful and an unsuccessful launch period.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think when that walks into our office, I think one of the questions and one of the areas where I get curious is, talk to me about that barrier to you being able to launch. So the barrier to you reflecting on your own values and wants, examining any of that, because something is stopping them from doing that. And so maybe it's fear, maybe it's they've never even thought about it. I don't know, but I get curious about what's holding them back from that. And sometimes that is giving tools and helping them through all of that. Sometimes there's more going on, and it's going to require more people and more support, which is okay as well. But I think that's the place I start to get curious is what's the barrier? And if we can really go there, it's like, what does that barrier look like? Who does that barrier sound like? And I think that helps them start to figure out and really kind of name that there's something holding them back, whether it's themselves, their parents, no idea, but something is holding them back.
A religious culture can also be something that keeps people from launching, and even like a Southern culture.
Yeah.
And I think different cultures launch differently.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think for many people, the launch looks like college.
Yeah.
Especially in our area.
Yeah.
I'm talking to seniors in high school, and I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
And so there is this clear defined moment. I move into my dorm room, right?
Yeah.
That is a clear launch.
Yep.
And not everyone goes to college.
Yeah.
And so that's where sometimes it can look a little bit different. Or that, okay, what happens after college? If there isn't a job,
Yeah.
then okay.
Yeah.
We're still kind of in that launch phase when we're preparing to set ourselves up in terms of a career and a family, whatever you want for your life.
Absolutely. In some ways, we go back through a launch phase when it comes to graduating college, right? And often, I think I hear college students and post-grad students saying, this isn't what I thought it would be. And as therapists, we know when we hear that phrase, that's grief, because there was some sort of expectation that we had that is now no longer being met. So whether it's marriage, relationship, job, finances, where you're going to live, all of that you had an expectation for, and it's not panning out the way you thought it would. And so I think even the post-grad kind of launch phase sometimes is a lot of grief work of saying, where did we create those expectations? Were those fair? Were those not fair? And helping them kind of unpack what they wanted and allowing space for you can still desire those things and still want those things, but almost having to relaunch again because it's grief. It's grief that they've graduated college and are not in the situation that they thought they would be in.
Yeah. A lot of like the trap, I think, of college is the students I'm working with, that is their main focus. The clarity of, I'm going to college.
Yeah.
And then what?
Yeah.
And if we can't see past college, there can be that stalling out of, okay, like, what if I don't have clarity after college? What if I don't find the person I want to marry in college? Now I have to launch again. And I think what you're hitting on is there is an initial launch phase. It is that push into independence. And there can be a crashing down of identity, direction, goals, values, beliefs.
Yeah.
And so we can have a relaunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would love to hear about what you see and what you have experienced in terms of relaunching.
Mm-hmm. Relaunch is one of the hard and really fun parts, I think, of our job. It can be a place where people are really growing and stretching and failing, if that's the word we're going to use. And when we get to watch them launch, it is like, job well done. I was just finishing a counseling session before we started recording, and I opened up my door and Lydia was standing there. She was in the hallway and she said, "Oh my gosh, are you done?" Because I was early. And I said, "Yeah." And I kind of took a big sigh and I said, "I think we're going to term soon." And I've been with her about a year. Terminate, right? It sounds scary.
No.
But I've been with her about a year and she's done the work and she's doing really well. And so that is what it feels like at the end of a really successful launch phase when it's brought into our therapy office. And so it's a sweet moment.
I think what you're hitting on is, in order to relaunch, there is a level of dependence that we go back into.
Yes.
Because of whatever circumstance.
Yep.
But I'm having to rely upon people before I can relaunch into my new identity, my independence again.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so great that we get to be a part of that process.
Yeah.
It really is.
It is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is beauty in the pieces falling apart.
Yeah.
And then getting to relaunch. And I'm wondering what you have experienced in terms of a relaunch.
Yeah. I experienced a relaunch late in my 20s when a really important relationship in my life crumbled. And at the time, I felt like my life had just shattered in pieces. And where I thought I would be at 27 was not at all where I was. And what I thought my future would be was not at all an option anymore. And so I remember thinking everything is shattered. And when you picture something that has completely shattered, there are pieces everywhere. Big pieces, small pieces, everywhere. And I really learned with my own therapist and through a lot of years of healing that the best part about something shattering is you get to put the pieces back wherever you want them. And so I slowly got to do that. I moved to Nashville and I have some of my best friends here, and there are a handful of families who have adopted me since I've been here, and I just spent the weekend with one of them celebrating their kid playing college football and celebrating their other kid launching into college. Wow. And it was so fun to get to watch. Those were pieces I put back together of this family is now a part of me and I am a part of that family. And I get to put all those pieces together. And that's the beautiful part about a relaunch. And I would probably push to say that we don't really ever ask for the relaunch. It is usually something happens out of our control, whether it's death, end of a relationship, loss of a job, any type of situation like that. A relaunch is not something we're ever asking for.
It's so painful.
Yes.
A relaunch is so painful.
Yes.
And I'm sure during that time you had to rely upon the people that were closest to you.
Yep. I absolutely did. And I had a great therapist. So every good therapist has a good therapist. Yes. Yeah, I did.
So in terms of my launch phase, I have a really close family.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard to launch from a family that you're really, really close to.
Yeah.
Because I aligned with them. And so I spent a lot of time with them. And so my life and their lives were intertwined.
Yeah.
And so part of launching, I think, was finding a life outside of my family and finding where I want them to fit into my life.
Yes.
Yeah. Not that I don't love them. I love them so deeply.
Yes.
And I have my own family.
Yeah.
And I have my own ideas and my own beliefs and my own values. And some of those align with my family and some of them don't. Yeah. And that is okay.
Yes.
That is totally okay.
Yes.
So to give some context, when I graduated, I went to Australia.
Wow.
So like
Good day, mate.
I literally hopped on a plane and I cried like the whole way because I was so close to my family.
Yeah.
And so I was in Australia and that side of the world for about 6 months of my life. And that was really helpful for me to be around people like me in a similar phase of life, in a launch phase of life, figuring out who are we.
Yeah.
And so, but then I came back. I moved back.
Yeah.
And then I launched again.
Yeah.
Going into college. And so, and then I had a really tough time with college. And so I needed more support in order to transfer colleges. And so I needed a lot of support through college. And then I got my master's degree. And then, you know, I had to do a lot of schooling.
Yep.
And so I relied a lot upon my family for that support to kind of launch and then relaunch and then not launch, you know. And so I think I had an extended launch period. And I think it took me a while to feel like a full-grown adult. Yeah. You know? Yeah. I think just because I was in school for so long.
Yeah. And there's an element of being in school makes us feel like less of an adult, which I don't think is necessarily true, but I just think that's the kind of the way that pans out sometimes.
Yeah. I just hadn't arrived.
Yeah.
That's it for me. I think what I struggled with was feeling like I had arrived at adulthood. Yeah. And I think this is why launch phase is like fuzzy. Yeah. It's like, how do we know that we're launched? Because I think I launched in different phases. Yes. And how did I know at what point was I like, okay, I am launched. Yeah. Fully.
And you bring up a good point. Like sometimes I think we launch at different phases in the sense of maybe at times financially, people launch that way first or last, or spiritually they launch, or mentally, emotionally, physically. Like though all of those parts of who we are not going to launch at all the same time. And so I think your experience gives perspective that we need to be reminded of, that it doesn't all just happen at once. There are different paces for each of those parts of who we are.
Yeah. Why would it be important for someone to launch?
It's important because I think it's what we all want. Because launching is the first step to our own identity, to our own family, to our own ownership of who we are. We have to launch in order to do that. We have to launch in order to examine beliefs and values and who we want to be and what we want to do in this world. And so that is the step. And culture and society say that step is after high school, right? And so sure, for lots of people it is. For lots of people it is later. But we have to launch in order to become, I think, just fully content with who we are, and even I would say to discover who we are. And we have to launch in order to do that.
Yeah. This ties in so well with boundaries.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to the episode with Danielle Reeves about boundaries, I think that one is a great one.
Yes.
To go back and give a listen to.
Yes.
Because launching is establishing space.
Yes.
With your family of origin.
Yep.
Again, not in a bad way. We love our family of origin.
Yes.
And it's space to say, I am my own human being. I am my own adult. Yeah. I think one of the most fun things about becoming an adult, I remember like being in college and being like, nobody's gonna make me eat anything. Yes. Or do anything. Yes. I don't have to go to bed at a certain time. I am the manager of my own life.
Yes.
And for so many people, what is normal is you make pretty terrible decisions. Yeah. I think actually this is the fear that parents have is I don't want to let go because they're going to make bad decisions. And
they will.
They are going to make bad decisions. And how do you let them?
Yes.
How do you let them make bad decisions?
Yeah. Which we could spend 3 more hours on this podcast talking about that, because you let them because you trust the attachment, the connection, the relationship, the foundation, the launch pad, if you will. You trust that.
Yes.
You trust that they're going to make mistakes, but
They'll come back.
they'll come back.
They'll come back.
They'll come back.
And that's okay.
Yes.
So for many parents, they know what they did in college.
Yes.
They know the mistakes that they made.
Yeah.
Only upon reflection, they go, oh my gosh, I was an idiot.
Right.
And I don't want my kid to make those same choices.
Yes.
Because that's not what I believe anymore.
Yes.
I don't believe that's right.
Yes.
And I don't want them to choose to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so this is where some of the tension can be, and the difficulty.
Yeah.
That this child you have launched can now make bad decisions for themselves.
Yes.
That are unhealthy for them, or just that you wouldn't agree with.
Yeah. Yeah. And as parents, the lens in which they look is they know the cost of those mistakes.
They know the cost.
And that's great. But in the moment, we don't see the cost.
Yeah.
And so they know the cost of those mistakes. And as a healthy, normal parent, you don't want your children to experience a big cost or a painful cost.
No.
And so we will do whatever we can to make sure we prevent that. We want to prevent that painful cost. And that is not always the wisest or healthiest decision for your child.
Well, it damages their relationship.
Yes.
Because I think the beauty in adolescence into the launch is they get to make bad decisions.
Yes.
Now, when they're living under your roof and they're under 18, you have a little bit more say and enforcing those consequences. They go off to college and they make bad decisions. That's on them.
Yeah.
And it is, you're right in that, like, we don't want them to be in pain and pay consequences. And I think that is actually the purpose of the launch phase.
Yes.
Is to try new things.
Yes.
And hopefully not make too many mistakes that impact the rest of our lives. Nobody wants to be in jail or, have a felony or something.
Yes.
But to try out new things outside of the safety of a family.
Yes. Yes. And parents' work and responsibility in that is allowing their kids to try new things, even if it's things that they don't want them to try.
Yep. I mean, I think about how dumb I was in my late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
And I made some questionable decisions.
Yes.
And I am so thankful that I was able to make those decisions because they allowed me to clarify who I am and what I want for my life and what I don't want for my life.
Yes. I completely agree.
Yeah. That phase is needed.
It is.
To become a healthy adult.
Yes. Yep. It is the way we become healthy adults.
It's kind of screwing up a little bit.
It is. And allowing space for the launch.
Yeah. I think what I want to challenge us is that launch doesn't have to look a certain kind of way.
Yeah.
That there is beauty in launching and relaunching and even launching different parts of yourself at different times.
Yeah.
How many times have I said launch in this podcast? Probably 150.
Yep.
There is beauty in launching different parts of yourself at different times. And so I'm wondering if you could give our listeners a message of hope. If they're listening, thinking, part of me hasn't launched yet. Maybe I am independent financially, but emotionally I'm not.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if you can give a message of hope for maybe somebody who doesn't have the full independence yet.
Yeah. I think 2 things I would say. One, it's never too late to launch. It's never too late to launch. think the second thing I would say is there's no shame that your launch has not looked the way that people thought it would. Mm-hmm. And so I would also encourage them to explore what's going on inside of them. I would encourage them to go to therapy and unpack the barriers to them being able to launch. But I think the two biggest pieces are it's never too late to launch, and there's no shame if your launch looks not the way people thought it would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what are people, like, who are the people that are saying you have to launch a kind of way?
Yes.
It's your life.
Yes. And I think Alexis Rose says it best, that nobody thinks about you the way that you think about you.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if we have kept you company, that's my whole main goal here, is to keep our listeners company as they're doing the dishes or taking care of their kids or driving in their car, that we're just like friends talking about therapeutic things that they might or might not relate to.
Yeah.
And so I'm so thankful for all of our listeners.
Yes.
And I thank you for being here today.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I love when we do these together. I feel like we're just having a conversation, and I feel like people are just getting to listen and watch to what happens when we pop out of therapy sessions. So
that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, we've basically had mini podcasts.
Yes.
Like Every Day I See You.
Yes.
I'm like, have you been thinking about blah, 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 blah?
Yes.
And getting to explore these topics with you.
Yeah.
If you love this episode, give us a rating.
Yes.
A good rating.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
Subscribe, comment,
share.
Yeah,
if you know somebody who is maybe a family member or a loved one of a quote-unquote failure to launch person, I think this could be a great reframe for them. And if we've just kept you company, that is totally okay too.
Yes.
I hope you got comfortable, because we are off the clock.